What if I told you the devil is closer than you think, and it's not actually a real person, force, or spiritual entity outside of you, but a being and an aspect of your own mind and psyche? In this video, you will learn exactly what the devil is and the true esoteric meaning of the devil. The first thing we need to understand is that the universe is a mental universe. Look around you. Every action, every building, everything you see around you was begun first as thought in the mind, then manifested. We use the mind to build and shape our reality. The universe, the world, only exists inside of our mind. Therefore, God and the devil exist inside of our own psyche. So first of all, the devil is not a literal being, but a symbol of the lower self. It represents the unmastered, ego-driven part of the human mind, a symbol of destructive thoughts, emotions, behaviors, lives in realms of chaos, fear, hatred, lust, and ignorance. This is why we see the devil as red, because red is the lowest vibrational color on the color spectrum. It also corresponds with the root chakra, which is all to do with survival instincts. Red represents chaotic and intense emotions like hatred and anger. When we are angry, our face turns red. The devil represents our animalistic fundamental needs, our instinctual needs, our survival state of consciousness. We have a survival state of consciousness and a godly state of consciousness. Our godly state of consciousness is creating, not just experiencing in the animal state, but consciously creating reality. This is why we see the devil with a goat head, an animalistic head, and the head is where the brain is. The animal head represents living off instinct, the part of our mind that lives on urges, impulses, and instincts, eating, sex, power, ego-driven actions, and ego-driven thoughts. Animals are only aware of themselves. Animals live on instinct. They have no ability to consciously create like humans. This is our lower desires for the material world. That's not to say the material world is evil. However, when our consciousness is only seeking material things, this leads us down a path of self-destruction, because nothing material can ever satisfy our soul. Everything material is temporary. Therefore, the devil represents the part of us that seeks only material desires, only material fulfillment, the ways of thinking where we only think about ourselves and ego-driven thoughts. It also represents the unchecked, unconscious self, where we have no mastery over our thoughts, over our emotional impulses, and no mastery over our actions. We're living in instinct and impulsive states, which causes chaos, selflessness, destruction, and keeps us bound to our lower material 3D state of consciousness. It's important to recognize that the word devil was never present in the earliest Gospels. Instead, what was mentioned was a spirit of evil. This distinction is crucial because it underscores that the idea of the devil, as popularly conceived, does not actually exist as an independent entity. Rather, it is a personification of the lower aspects of the human mind, a facet of our own consciousness. The term spirit of evil was not meant to denote a specific deity or being, but rather any force of negativity, whether it manifests as a destructive thought, emotion, or action. A spirit is a force, an energy, and we have three forces that create our reality: thoughts, emotions, and actions. We have full control over these three aspects, which transform and mold reality. A destructive thought, a destructive emotion, a destructive action is a spirit of evil, and it originates from the darker aspects of the human psyche. So now, because we're on the topic of the devil, we have to look at the pentagram, which is obviously connected to the devil heavily. The upright pentagram represents spirit, air, water, earth, fire. Upright, which represents spirit, the most important element on top of the earthly elements, showing spiritual principles over material principles. As spiritual beings as we are, we have to put our spirit first, our higher self first, and material things second. Why? Because material things never satisfy us long term. Seeking material fulfillment will leave us feeling unfulfilled in the long run and very unhappy, and we can lose ourselves in illusions. We have to put our spiritual principles first, seeking wisdom, knowledge, connection to the divine, and connection to our higher self itself is what gives us true fulfillment in our hearts and souls. But when we see this pentagram inverted, we now have spirit on the very bottom, which now represents earthly principles on top of the spiritual principles. We're putting our earthly elements on top of our spiritual element, which this inverted pentagram represents no longer caring about spirit, no longer caring about our invisible internal world, and only caring about this external body, food, sex, material things, cars, money, and all the things outside of us, the world outside of our mind. This is what true Satanism is. Satanism is not worshipping an external deity, but it is worshipping the self, only fulfilling the ego's desires. This is what true Satanism is, and we have all been conditioned to live in this state. Satanists want us to believe that there is an external deity called Satan or the devil, and the reason they do this is because they trick us, making us believe that we are not Satanists, while they are actually conditioning us to be self-seeking, ego-driven people, where we only care about sex, food, material things, and money, which is actually conditioning us to be Satanists. 80% of the population today are unknowingly involving themselves in Satanism, which is ego-driven thoughts, actions, and emotions, dwelling and living in this state where we only care about ourselves. When we are spiritual, we realize we are all one. We are all one consciousness family, and we need to do things that help and contribute towards our collective experience, helping others instead of seeking to serve only the self. The angel is depicted with wings, which represents elevation, higher self. The devil is represented with an animal horns, which is on the ground. A goat is on the ground, which represents the lower self. This is the elevated mind and the lower material mind. Horus, the bird, higher self. Set, the ground animal, lower self. Jesus and Satan. These are two forces, two characters that exist within the human psyche, not real entities. They are forces of our minds, and there is a battle between our higher self and lower self all the time within our own minds. There's always a part of us that's telling to do one thing and another thing, to do something bad and to do something good. There is this battle inside of our own consciousness. Here we have the human spinal column. The human spinal column is showing you the higher and the lower self. The higher self represents the head. The head is where the mind is. This is the creative essence of the universe. This is where all material things begin as a thought in the mind. We create with the skull, with the brain. This is our higher self, the heavens, connected to the heavens, the sky. And the lower end of the spinal column is where our reproductive organs are, where our gut is. Our reproductive organs and our gut is all to do with survival. The lower end of the spinal column, lower instinctual 3D based consciousness. The lower end of the spinal column is where our lower self dwells. Eating, consumption, power, and sex, lust. These are all emotional forces and instinctual based organs that are not inherently evil, but when we dwell and live off this lower end of the spinal cord, it keeps us in low states of consciousness. Our goal to raise to our higher mind is to balance this, not to overeat, not to abuse power, not to abuse sex and lust, but to master these organs and gain the ability to say no to these organs so that we can raise to our creative side of consciousness. Instead of dwelling in our instinctual nature, we can turn to our creative nature and consciously become a builder and constructor of reality. This is the true way of raising consciousness. This is the stairway to heaven, out of the animal consciousness to the higher consciousness. To wrap all of this up, it's all about gaining control over our instinctual lower nature and allowing our spirit to rule over our body and not our body ruling over our spirit or mind. The moment you let a thought become instantly an action is the moment you are an impulsive person. We are all trained to be this way. It is okay if you are in this state. The moment you let a thought turn straight into an action without questioning, that is the mind controlling you and you not controlling the mind. We need to gain control over the mind, and we do this through many different ways, through meditations, affirmations, and discipline, we slowly gain control over our minds. And once we gain control over our minds, we gain control over our thoughts, and we gain control over the attention that we give certain thoughts. We can then start to uplift our mind, our thoughts, out of our instinctual state to the higher mind. If you wish to learn more about consciousness, I'll leave a link in the description for the Book of Wisdom, Volume 2.